Tonight's story was submitted by a user. I read a spell from the internet, and I could never sleep after that. I was 16 years old, and in desperate need of a boyfriend. So I turned to the internet for help. Yes, I know there are other options like just going out and meeting someone yourself. But come on, I had no luck with that. And what if he wasn't the one? What if I missed my chance at true love? All because I didn't cast this spell I found online? No way. So late one night, armed with a pen, a candle, and a sheet of paper, I wrote down the name of my crush and began the ritual. I think I messed up on the pronunciation of some of the Latin words, but thankfully no one was around to hear me butcher this ancient language. As the candle burned down, my hopes of getting a boyfriend grew higher and higher. When it was all done, I buried the paper in the backyard and waited. The next day, I saw him across the cafeteria, and my heart skipped a beat. He actually waved at me. Did the spell work? Was this a sign? The next day, worked up the courage to talk to him, and soon enough we were dating. But our relationship didn't last long. Maybe it was the stress of all those spells I was casting, but he broke up with me after only a few weeks. Months went by and my grades started to slip. I felt like a failure. My parents would ground me for weeks when they found out about my failing grades. But I had bigger problems than my parents being mad at me. I couldn't sleep. I would lay in bed for hours staring at the ceiling trying to get some rest. But I just couldn't. If I closed my eyes, I saw my crush's face everywhere I looked. And no matter how much sleep I got, I always woke up exhausted. One night, I decided to do something drastic. I went into the backyard and dug up the paper I had buried after my failed love spell. I reread the incantation and realized I had made a mistake. The website I had gotten the spell from wasn't for love. It was for nightmares. Now I knew why I couldn't sleep. It was the spell. But how do I stop it? I remembered my grandmother, the queen of all things spiritual, giving me advice on how to deal with spells gone wrong. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but I had no other choice. I called her and told her I needed help. She asked me what I had done, and after I told her, she told me to get ready. We drove to an antique store. Once inside, she told me to pick an item from the back corner of the store. I hesitated, then picked up an ornate music box. My grandmother smiled and told me it would help me. Then we headed outside. As we walked toward my car, I told her about my nightmares. They had started almost as soon as I had done the love spell. Every night, I dreamt of an emaciated old woman reaching for me with gnarled fingers. She would drag me through the mud, laughing hysterically as I struggled to free myself from her grasp. And then I would wake up screaming. My grandmother listened intently. After I finished telling her about my dreams, she told me who the old woman was in my dream. It was Baba Yaga. You may have heard of her before. She is a witch in Slavic folklore, a crone who lures children into her hut and devours them. But she doesn't always appear in your dreams as an old woman. Sometimes she can appear as a beautiful maiden or even a handsome prince. In some cases, she can even appear in your life as a person, taking on a human form to deceive unsuspecting victims. I told my grandmother I hadn't seen anyone that looked like the old woman from my dreams, but she still told me that I must be careful. Even though the old woman hadn't physically appeared in my life yet, she had appeared in my dreams, which meant that I was already in danger. My grandmother warned me not to trust anyone. After we parted ways, I went home and locked my doors. That night, as I lay in bed, I tried to ignore the pounding of my heart and the way my sheets tangled around my legs. The music box sat on my bedside table, and its ornate design seemed to mock me. The moment I closed my eyes, I was in a forest. A crooked cottage loomed ahead. Its windows were dark, like vacant eye sockets staring into my soul. Suddenly, the door creaked open, revealing a shadowy figure. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The figure beckoned, and I found myself drawn to the cottage as if under a spell. Then I woke up. My heart raced, and I sat up in bed. The nightmare had been so vivid, and now the morning light seemed dim and lifeless. Fear coiled in my stomach, and I knew I wasn't dreaming. Baba Yaga was in my life now, and she wouldn't leave until I gave her what she wanted. I started paying closer attention to the people around me, but I didn't recognize any of them. None of them matched the description of the old woman from my dreams. Days turned into weeks, and I became increasingly anxious. I jump at every creak in the house, convinced that Baba Yaga had somehow infiltrated my home. I reached out to my grandmother again, and she told me to keep calm. She also told me that Baba Yaga feeds off fear. The more afraid I was, the stronger she became. Her power over me would only grow if I let it. But how do you fight a witch? I asked my grandmother. She suggested I try to find the source of my fear and confront it head on. Easier said than done, I thought. How do you confront an unknown fear? But then I remembered the music box. It was the only thing I had touched when I first encountered the old woman in my dream. I went to my room and picked it up. Its cheery tune seemed grating and fake now. I stared at the music box, willing the old woman to appear, and suddenly she was there. She stood in front of me, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes black pits. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer out. "You know me," she rasped, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You brought me here. What do you want?" I cried. "To play a game," she cackled. "A game, always win." And with that, she vanished. Frustration boiled inside me, so I did the only thing I could think of. I smashed the music box with a hammer. The sound of shattering glass mingled with the old woman's screams. I imagined her trapped within the box, and a sense of triumph surged through me. I threw out the shards and wiped the sweat from my brow. Finally, I could sleep soundly again. But that night, my dreams took a terrifying turn. Instead of the familiar forest, I found myself in a vast, featureless void. The old woman stood before me, her form radiating an eerie, pulsating light. She outstretched a gnarled finger and a single word escaped her lips: "Run." Then she dissolved into the darkness. I awoke in a panic, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I scrambled out of bed and raced to the window. Outside, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. Relief washed over me. I was safe, for now. But Baba Yaga's final words echoed in my mind. Run. Run from what? As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I turned around, I half expected to see the old woman standing there, her eyes gleaming with triumph. The thought of her lingering presence drove me crazy. I tried to distract myself with schoolwork, but even that offered little respite. The pages in my textbook swam before my eyes, and the words jumbled into a meaningless mess. I reached out to my grandmother, desperate for guidance. She listened patiently to my fears, and when I hung up the phone, I felt a sliver of calm settle over me. I knew she was right. I couldn't let Baba Yaga's presence defeat me. I had to take charge. But how could I escape something I couldn't see? I racked my brain for a solution. Then I remembered another detail from my dreams. The old woman always appeared in the most desolate, empty places, in the middle of nowhere, in forgotten corners. I realized that she thrived on neglect, on places that had been abandoned and left to rot. I looked around my room, taking in the posters on my walls, the books on my shelves, the photos on my desk. These were the things that gave my room character, that made it feel lived in. With newfound determination, I began clearing out my room. I ripped down the posters, packed away the books and trinkets, and erased the pictures from my walls. Slowly but surely transformed my room into a barren, lifeless space. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, I finished my transformation. My room was empty, devoid of anything that made it uniquely mine. I sank onto my bed, exhaustion pulling at my eyelids. But before I drifted off, I heard a whisper, a triumphant cackle that echoed through my empty room. Baba Yaga had found me. Just as I had hoped, I opened my eyes and found myself in the same desolate void as in my dream. The old woman stood before me, her form shimmering in the darkness. But unlike before, there was no hint of triumph in her eyes. Instead, confusion clouded her features. "You have made yourself nothing," she rasped, her voice echoing strangely in the void. "There is no fear here, no joy, only emptiness." "I am nothing," I whispered back, savoring the despair in my voice. "And perhaps you aren't able to win if I'm nothing." Her form flickered, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of fear cross her features. Then she was gone. I returned to my room to the sight of the sunrise filtering through my barren window. The old woman was gone. I rose from my bed and walked to the window. As the first rays of sunlight touched my skin, I felt a surge of triumph. I had one. That day, I began to fill my room back to how it was before. One book, one poster, one photo at a time. With each item I put back, I felt my power return. I had faced my fear and emerged victorious. The old woman never appeared again, not in my dreams or my waking hours. But sometimes at night, when the wind whispers through my window, I think I hear her voice, a faint cackle carried on the breeze, forever reminding me of the time I outsmarted Baba Yaga. And with that, we've reached the end of our story. Waiting for your feedback in the comments. If you have a story you'd like me to share, leave it in the comments. And the story that gets the most engagement and likes will be put in the weekly voting until its turn comes.